we are focusing on people operations and HR services, and specifically about Agile and Lean within that. What are the differences between Agile and Lean, and giving you examples of both. They kind of go a bit hand in hand because Lean principles are in the background of Agile. So let's start digging in. Before we do that, though, let's have a short introduction. So I'll just use 2 words to introduce myself. My name is Riina Hellström. I am the founder of Agile HR Community and a HR leader that started looking into Agile in 2010, so 13 years ago. And when I started looking into agility, I realized that that's going to change how organizations are run. That was the time when it was only used in software, but I realized that, wow, this is going to change because the world is getting so complex and the changes are so frequent and so quick that organizations can't keep up with the annual planning, with the traditional organization where we have manager after manager after manager, very many layers. It's too slow. So they need to figure out other ways of working, which meant that agility is going to come as an operating model to different places in the organization. That left me in a place where I needed to stop my work, jump off the corporate ladder and start working with agility and bringing that in. So that's the path I am on. And I'm super thrilled, super honored to have Agile HR Community to help companies now and have amazing colleagues such as Monica Murer, who is our Agile HR lead trainer and also people operations leader. So in our organization, we have consultants and trainers who also are HR or change strategy professionals. So Monica, would you be kind to welcome, first of all? Lovely to have you here. I'm very happy to have this session for the EU and APAC time zone with you. Would you be so kind to introduce your background and yourselves so we know what kind of experience we're kind of getting to hear from?
Definitely. Thank you, Riina. And good morning, everyone, wherever you are. I see lots of cool places where you are dialing in. So we are very honored to have you here. So my name is Monica Murer, as Riina mentioned. I have started learning the Agile HR Practitioner Trainer with Riina's team, a little under 2 years ago, trying to kind of, deepen my knowledge and kind of, learn from the best, basically. And I got very much attracted by this concept of the fact that basically the people that are delivering trainings and that are working on all the consulting materials, they are not 100% consultants, but they come from what I call kind of, the real world. So they are still in touch with all of the operational and stakeholder engagement and everything else. So that's something, that's quite unique, and that got me attracted to become part of Riina's team as well. In my kind of day-to-day job, currently I work for Uber and I lead the people operations team for EMEA and APAC. And we pretty much, use Agile and Lean intertwined in a lot of ways across all of the HR functions. And previously, I have quite a lengthy experience working for more traditional companies, manufacturing environment. I've been working for Siemens and Honeywell for a long time, not only in HR, but also previously in procurement and IT. So I'm kind of, this product of, support functions and understanding, the connection between all of the processes. And I feel, kind of that's a little bit my superpower, that I can not only speak HR language, but also other functions language and a little bit technical as well. So that kind of facilitates my life on a day-to-day basis and allows me to contribute differently to the success of our teams. Otherwise, I have started, let's say, my journey with Lean and Six Sigma from the, let's say, manufacturing environment, very traditional way of looking at Six Sigma, very process-oriented. Then, moved into Lean, went through the certifications and all of these statistics that go behind it in a lot of these things, with a wish to understand it better and to be able to apply it within my day-to-day job. Recently, I think, I realized that actually this combination of Lean and Agile is, kind of tackling the problems that we need to solve from two very important angles. One kind of, like the human-centered way, and the other one, the process side. So yeah, that's how I got to do what I'm doing, and I'm quite excited about it.
Excellent. Thank you for your background story. What I think is really important here when we're speaking with Monica is to understand you've been working with process development all across the organization, not just in HR. And I think that brings you another perspective into, you've been either the customer, the user, or the victim of HR services, right? If you can use these words. So
that's pretty much right. Yeah. So I could have this picture, like I think when I moved into HR, a little over 10 years ago, and I can say I found my home, right? Because I feel like we have, I can have a lot more impact towards people's lives in the way we shape the processes and the way we kind of, make lives easier in most of the cases for our users. I think, it was a big change, mindset change, saying, okay, now I moved from being a customer or a user of the services and a partner into actually, kind of understanding how it works and, why things are done in a certain way. So that's quite interesting. It has helped me many times. There were also times, when probably, I had to explain it a little bit, where I'm coming from and the way of, changing a bit the perspective.
Well, fantastic. This takes us into the first conversation area, thinking about what are the trends in HR service. Now, so a little bit of background. I think that HR services is a place who many people work in, and they don't realize how big of a difference, how big of an impact their services have throughout the whole organization. Some people, I think, might not respect and have that acknowledgement of that work enough, thinking that they're just running operations. But every time you do a transactional operation, you're helping somebody on the front line, close to your customer or in your operations, to do their job in a better way, to be a better employee, to get their performance rolling, to get something done, an administrative task, which is important for them. And I think that first I want to acknowledge the HR services and the operations, because some people think that only the strategic projects are the trendy, important things, but that's not what it is. If your operations aren't running well, you can't do really development or strategic projects on top of that. So just wanted to do that acknowledgement first here. Let's raise our hats for HR services first, and then start thinking about what are the trends that's happening in this area right now, the HR services. Monica, what are you seeing?
I would say that, I start saying that generally I'm an optimist. So when I look at the hardest period in my life in HR services, that has been COVID. And I can imagine that, like a lot of my peers that are part, of the people operations teams, they acknowledge that because, the COVID period came with, I would say a traumatic event for all of us. But if I look at the bright side, right, if I try to look at what was good coming out of that, is that I think it elevated the value of the people operations and HR services in general. I think a lot of companies that were not yet convinced about investments in technology, about, the importance of maturing this function, this part of the HR, understood very quickly that they had to have a very well-organized HR, let's say, and I don't like the term back office, right? Because it's very much front office in many areas, but that they need to invest in that. And the ones that had already made the investments in technology, in kind of, having methodologies on how they approach continuous improvement in their people operations environments, they were pretty much navigating much easier. So I think, that out of COVID, if I'm taking one positive thing, is that it did elevate the value, and it did improve the visibility of the value that people operations teams bring to an HR organization, not only in times of crisis and when, you have a lot of events that bring a lot of volumes and urgency, but also in general in ensuring that you keep that employee experience and you treat your users, your customers, internal customers with respect. And in a way, like that they engage in a positive way with the services and the processes that you're deploying. So I think, coming from that, we also have seen that within, 2021, 2022, I think the technology area in people operations has attracted a record amount of investments as well, because, like everything just, like was in demand. Not only new tools and new processes, but also being able to scale them very, very quickly in an agile way, right? So for me, if I look back at this period and also, like things that I was working pre-COVID on when I was in Honeywell, I would say there are 3 different trends that I would articulate very clearly. The first one would be the experience. So a huge focus on how does it feel? How easy is it?
Yes.
Kind of, like this concept of consumer grade experiences, which, like I remember a few years ago, like within HR, we had to Google it to understand what it means. And then, to kind of figure out, well, okay, if this is what it means outside of HR, what does it actually mean within the HR function? The second one, which is very much interlinked, is the automation with the good and the bad. I think there is a huge effort to go after the coolest, most amazing tool. And we sometimes forget that the tool isn't everything. And when I start looking at new processes, I always tell my teams, we don't talk tool yet. We just first have to figure out what is the vision of the process, how it should look like, what it should do for us. And only then we invite all the technology consultants in the room and we figure out how the technology can help us. Because I've seen it very often, that we go after the tool and we try to make the process fit the tool. And at the end of the day, like you end up in those projects, like that don't bring the results. And, I'm pretty sure that a lot of us here in the session have been part of those, rushed technology implementations without necessarily taking the time to think about the process first.
Exactly. Great. We used 2 million euros to get a tool into the house and nobody's actually using it. Yeah. So yeah, these kind of things.
And I would guess, like coming out of the also, I would say post-COVID period and current economic situation, I see a huge interest in value-added services within people operations. So can we do more within people operations? Can we simplify the processes more? And can we, like kind of adopt agile principles in the way we collaborate and we work together? So I think that's the third trend. And kind of all together, basically, they bring that value, right? Like the experience, the automation, and the value add services. I would say, like intertwined, they bring that value to the stakeholders we're working with internally in the teams.
Amazing, thank you. Experience-based automation, value-added services. I have a couple of things which I kind of would like, it's kind of a perspectives into these. The first one is, because I'm working with these type of things, I call it kind of participative development. So it's not any longer so that operations is in the end of the chain and they are handed over a ready baked product or process saying, here is how you kind of maintain the operations for this process. Now I see that they are much more also participating in the development of processes because they got the touch points towards the users. So this is clearly a trend that I'm seeing happening now. Kind of, if we speak agile words, it's DevOps type of a thinking, where the operational part is included in the development part because they are so connected. Have you seen this? It's kind of an upcoming trend. It's not that big yet, but more and more I can see this. Have you?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the maturity, kind of the organization as well. I guess, where you have a good collaboration and a partnership and let's say, I would say a good working engine when it comes to, like co-creating and HR services having a seat at the table in HR councils or, like kind of people, leadership teams, and so on, I think you see what you are mentioning, right? You see that, you know, like that recognition that, okay, you know, like we have a new process to set up. Well, you know, like Monica from People Ops, can you work out what the process could look like so that we can operationalize it later and scale it, and then, you know, like get all the buy-in from the other teams? So I think there is a recognition of that. I've been recently, you know, like talking to colleagues, you know, like from, you know, big companies as well, where you would expect, you know, to have like kind of that level of maturity. And they were saying, yeah, well, we don't really have a seat at the table, right? So we normally are the last ones to find out. And, you know, like we are told, well, this is the new process, or we find out this is the new process, go and figure it out. And often, you know, like there are questions like, okay, but this doesn't work in this country.
Exactly. There are dependencies or something that
are not
doesn't
taken.
click.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think it's a lot about, you know, like the level of collaboration and the inclusion, right, of and the recognition of the value of the people operations, what I started with in the beginning. That is key, where, you know, like you you keep the accountability on the people operations of doing what they are good at, managing, you know, how to operationalize the process and scale it, and you hold them accountable to that. At the same time, you recognize the value that they bring to the organization. And I think doing more and more that will improve the lives of everyone within all of the HR functions, because all of a sudden we achieve what we all talk about, you know, like working on value add services and, you know, where you are bringing value versus where you know, like you don't bring any value, but you just patch a broken process.
That's where the second thing comes. I'm working with a very large organization currently, and they're in I mean, it's like 50,000 people. So, you know, in that type of an organization, the HR is a bit siloed because it's so big. So you take care of your own areas. And now there's the new type of a HRIS system development coming up. And they're kind of running their own stream. And I'm trying to say, when I'm working with process development, with Agile and with the development part, is to, when we develop, you have to go to connect with that HRIS stream, because we can't develop something that can't be kind of delivered through the HRIS later on. We have to have in Agile, we call about definition of done. We have to have the constraints, kind of the box. Here is the box that we need to fit things into, which will later on be easier plugged into the system. And this is a really important thing and finding. And one of the key things there is also part of what you talked about, automation, is the architecture of the people data. Is how do we, when we develop something, how do we build the people data flow, the information flow? What information are we collecting, sharing? How is it stored? So it can be used later on, because one of the key trends is now also, of course, AI. I mean, ChatGPT just changed the game totally. And there are new ones coming in. Now, when anybody who doesn't have a coding possibility, I can speak with an AI just with natural language processing, and that can practically analyze millions rows of data for me in a split second. We're in a new era. AI is going to come into HR operations and HR services very quickly. We're not quite there yet, but many of these HRIS systems already have AI-assisted analytics, AI-assisted tools in them. Any comments on that AI machine learning part?
It's not new, right? Like it's been there since a while. So we've been playing, you know, like in the past, you know, with robotic process automation, with, you know, like chatbots that would learn intelligently, you know, like based on what you're asking, what the answers should be. And, you know, like I feel like, you know, there is no threat in there. Maybe I'm a little bit naive. I think, you know, like it's a process that we will go through. I mean, imagine, you know, like in the past, you know, like maybe, you know, like I remember many years ago when I was in IT, we had started partnering with ServiceNow. And they were at the very beginning, and the only thing they did was IT service management, and it looked very ugly. I mean, I remember it very, very vividly, that it was just terrible experience and the process was so clunky and so on. And look where ServiceNow is today, and I would say, like my job didn't disappear. It just, like got enriched. And I think, like a lot of the jobs, like in the industry just got enriched. Yeah, of course, like I guess, like the data entry type of roles that still probably exist in a lot of organizations, who maybe, like cannot afford making investments in tools that take away that, like would get facilitated, something like that. And I think in general, it will be something good, right?
Yes. I think so too.
For our industry, and it will just enrich our roles and free up our hands from things, like that probably don't make sense at the moment. So I think, like I'm welcoming those changes. I think we can experiment with them on small scale, medium scale, and then learn from it and see how, like kind of how it works and adapt, right? And what I also kind of, like realize, we're running currently, like a big exercise in, like kind of, understanding sentiment across the company around, like services we're doing and so on. And I am, like kind of astonished, like from the empathy interviews that I've been running, how much, like how little actually people talk about automation, like actual employees working with tools, and how much they talk about the need of human interaction. So I think, like these things, like kind of, they need to be balanced.
They go hand in hand.
And they go hand in hand.
Yeah. On the other hand, I see the younger generation, they don't want to call for getting help of a service, right? They want to do a chatbot, or they want to, do it in a way which isn't online with a person, and it needs to be correct, and it needs to be right now, it needs to be personalized. So I think AI will help a lot with that as well, whereas specifically for the benefit of the employee, that's where I think AI and machine learning and the chatbots and all these will be helpful. And also, as I said, enrich the work of the HR services and operations, where you don't have to do the basic, how many holiday days do I have remaining? And then you go into a system and then you answer by email, but that can be handled automatically. Let's move into Agile and Lean. So
perfect.
What is we have a theme called, what is the difference between Lean in HR and Agile in HR? And Lean and Agile are words which are kind of used in a very light way. People often say that without understanding what it really means. Lean has a very robust background, very disciplined way of working, and very much continuous improvement, human-centered way of working. And Agile comes in whereas things are new products are developed. We're working in very collaborative ways, in incremental ways there. So they are not just words lightly used by us who are Lean and Agile professionals. We actually understand what the theory, the background, the practices, principles, and values behind these are. So what would you say are the differences between Lean in HR and Agile in HR, Monica?
I'll use, like kind of differentiation that, like I've been using for a while, right, to explain it. I feel for me, like kind of Lean starts from the process view, and Agile is kind of, starting from a human view of the same outcome. And when I say that, like I think, you're right, Lean is a lot about, like kind of getting alignment on how we do things, and then doing things how we align we're going to do them. So it's a lot about, kind of that consistency in practices, in processes, taking care that, like the foundational elements are working fine, the way, like, for example, in HR services, you look at the volumes you're handling and their SLAs, and the feedback from the users, and like how many continuous improvement ideas you've implemented, and how do you spot them, and how do you do problem solving. I feel like kind of that takes care of all of the foundations, and it takes away the constant firefighting. I sometimes talk to peers of mine, and like you see them tired, and like kind of thinking, saying, like, oh, we got escalations after escalations, I can't sleep at night, and like I'm in firefighting mode all the time. I feel like lean is bringing a system together, and it's allowing you to have some structure in that, rather chaotic operational environment. And that allows you then to be able to also introduce, like these other elements from Agile, like kind of, like how can you bring new ideas to life in an incremental way? And how can you carve time for that, basically? Because if you don't get, like that level of maturity operationally in an HR services environment, then you pretty much, like are just stuck in that limbo of firefighting and dealing, like with things that are overwhelming you, rather than being able to be a little bit more proactive and plan further. So while I guess, like the process of getting to that level of maturity from operational and kind of lean perspective is not easy, and it's not like a pill you take in the morning and by lunchtime you are lean. It is a lengthy time, and it takes commitment and consistency from all the layers in the organization. I think once implemented, like you really can, you kind of build that trust and reliability on the services that you are delivering, and you all benefit at the end. So I'm a big advocate of using kind of, lean principles and processes within HR operations environment for all of the reasons I mentioned. And I couldn't be more excited about, like the introduction of Agile as well, because I think that brings, like continuously that voice of the employees, and that ability, like to iterate and to experiment, and to give yourself the right to experiment, to learn, and to kind of, like constantly adapt your processes to the needs of the users.
Very, very good. I've thought about Lean and Agile in this way. I think about lean as we already know what we aim to do. We have the right answer. Here's the right answer. This is what we aim to do. We have a process getting us to the end point. We want to get from A to B, and we know both A and B, and we know what happens in between. And now we can start improving that with lean tools, cutting waste, continuous improvement, looking at KPIs, having numbers, so that we can get from A to B in a more efficient, more better way. And that's lean for me, practically. Agile for me is we are not quite sure where we are. We don't maybe know exactly what the right thing to do is. And Agile helps us do that discovery, development, that journey step by step. So this is one way of me trying to make a difference between lean can be used in lean tools can be used in such a great way when you have the right answer. But Agile is super powerful when you need to create something, the creativity, the voice of the user, to understand how can we better, what would a new performance management process or practice look like? Well, you don't go into your HR bunker and decide yourself, oh, here is a new performance management process. Let's implement that and see how our users are experiencing that. No, you don't do that. If you're an Agilist, you're like, okay, what do we want out of a performance management system? What's the value that we want to create? You go and start speaking with a lot of stakeholders and users. If you're an Agilist, you create different alternatives, prototypes, testing these prototypes. You start doing that incremental development, getting to the right answer through feedback loops and incremental testing, learning, which isn't lean. It's more the creativity of Agile. What are your thoughts around this?
I think you're spot on, right? And like we've done this session a few weeks ago for the US team, and in the audience there was my very first Lean Six Sigma teacher.
Oh wow! Scary.
Scary. I was a little bit scared. So that's just like a little informal element there. But I remember we were chatting afterwards, and we had this discussion around actually, like when you think about lean, if you get a bicycle, right, you would always just get a better bicycle. If everything we had was a bicycle, if you use continuous improvement, you will always get, like a faster, nicer, more beautiful bicycle, basically. You would never get a car. Yes. It takes innovation and kind of, like thinking from, creating something different and totally different, like to get to a totally different product. And, for a very long time, I was not in agreement with that. And I said, no, continuous improvement actually is the tool, and you can get a lot out of it, and yes, innovation can come out of it. But actually, I do agree with you that Agile gives you kind of that warrant, that ability, right, to
it's giving you a broader playground.
Exactly, go and experiment, go
Yes.
and experiment, go and ask the questions, because you start from this, reframing problems and thinking about, problems from a totally different perspective, in ways that it invites for multiple solutions rather just one solution. So I feel like sometimes, Lean, it's, and a lot of the problem solving techniques from Lean, they are excellent and, great ways of, tackling problems. But sometimes, you can combine, ways of reframing problem statements so that you can get to that innovation. And that's why I love the combination of Lean and Agile.
Of these is great. Yeah. I want to share an example with the listeners. Is if you think about HR services, we are maintaining people, products, or processes that have been created about 20, 25 years ago, many of us.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't been gone through radical innovation, but we think about onboarding the same way in all companies. Most companies, 90% of companies have the same types of onboarding processes. 90% of companies go through the same kind of talent attraction and talent acquisition processes. If you look at employee surveys, I think that's the most unuseful process on earth currently, to ask people twice every second year with 200 questions what's going on. You can't really use that for anything because the frequency is so slow. So why do we hold on to these processes? Does it matter if we improve the employee survey process any longer with Lean? No, in my opinion, no. We need to go and ask ourselves new questions. We need to move towards the agile, the innovation part, and ask ourselves, what does our organization need? What was the kind of ground driver for having an employee survey overall? Is it just to understand, have metrics on something, or do we want to use it for the benefit of our employees, teams, or organization and managers? If we want to use it for the benefit of them, can we do it in a different way? And how could that be? Then we come to people thinking that, oh, we can just change the frequency. Let's do pulsing. Let's ask people 50 questions every month and do the same exact thing, not do anything about it, just have KPIs. That is not innovation, my friends. That is just wasting time of people to answer questions and not seeing any results. So I think the interplay of Lean becomes important when you have processes that work. If you have processes that are not working, not bringing value, not really liked, you're just becoming better at doing things which isn't working, which is not very helpful. Right. All right, let's move into practical examples. Practical examples of using Lean in HR services. So let's get into really concrete things. What do you have? Your top two?
My top two, I guess. I mean, we talked last time about inventory management, so I will bring it up here as well, because I think, I'm a big fan of, just kind of knowing what is on our plate to do and having, proper ways to prioritize the level of work and kind of, project, where do we want to be within 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, and so on operationally. So I think, inventory management is, it's a very strong one, and it's one of the foundational kind of elements within Lean, and it's one of the tools probably that has the biggest resemblance to manufacturing environment. So whenever I was visiting factories, I could imagine all of the tickets that we have in HR, going through the production line and just making sure that we have a way to spot when things are not working right visually and so on.
So when you speak, I just wanted to make sure for those of you who are not understanding what inventory management means, it means that all the work coming into our teams, what types of work are there? How long does it take? Where are the tickets moving? Lead times, just getting the understanding of the full workflow. Is that correct?
Exactly. That's absolutely right. And making sense, kind of that flow and understanding, how to work with it and how to stay ahead of that demand, right? I think that's the key element. I think also in the same way, identifying waste, right? is also kind of, like waste management is also something, that sounds very manufacturing, also kind of, way of looking at it. And in Lean, we talk about 7, 8 now. There are now 8 waste types.
Oh, really? I have only learned 7 waste types.
So they've added, like kind of an 8th one, which is more related to extra processing. So basically waste that are related to work that is being delivered by higher, kind of delivering in a higher quality than what is required, or with resources that have higher skills than what is required for. And that's quite interesting, right? I really love that that transformation. But basically, like if you learn about those 7, 8 type of wastes, then you can start, like kind of spotting what is potential for improvement, right? Within.
So let's do a couple of examples. Can you give me 2 examples of waste and HR example?
Yeah, for example, I would say, like kind of tracking defects, right? Understanding, like how many service failures, you have had, how many times have you delivered poor, like bad quality of contracts to new hires, and what is the data, right, that went wrong. In the same way, you can look at waiting times. So for example, like how much time, like do you take to approve something, or, like kind of number of approvals, right, in the process, are they really required or not, and what is
I'll give you an example of that.
Waiting time.
It's a recruitment process where one of the people we worked with, or teams that we worked with, realized that the approvals for a recruitment process sat a medium time of 3 weeks in the 2 above kind of approval box. And 3 weeks waiting time for getting a recruitment up and running is a long time for those who are waiting for that person to come and help them. So just understanding where those waiting times are in your process and starting to cut those waiting times with different ways is super important.
Yeah, I guess it's also kind of goes hand in hand with, I say, that if you don't measure it, like kind of you don't control it, it's, kind of out of sight, out of mind. So starting, to map those waiting times, it's always a fun exercise, like if you go into a new organization and you want to understand, like how can you make impact quickly, and what are, like kind of those relatively quick fixes, you start looking into waiting times, and then come up, with proposals of, hey, how can you cut some of those unnecessary steps? So
it's also it's also brutal sometimes to see those numbers.
It is indeed. So besides, defects and waiting times, I guess also, like one nice one, like it's the motion, right? Kind of how many times, like a process is being touched by multiple people. So very often, like you see, especially in siloed organization, like that someone...
the approvals, oh my God, the level of approvals.
It's also passing of the data, right? Like, people operations touches something for, the employee details for the sake of creating a contract, but then, like the same information is being moved to another team, and then to another team. And then, you figure out that every single of these teams, like have their own way of tracking the same data with their own spreadsheets and mechanisms and so on, simply because, like there is not a smooth kind of, like handing over process between the different functions, or you don't have a, like kind of a system of record that allows you to do that. And I guess that's one of the classics, the siloed thinking, and the fact, like that's things are, like every team is creating their own ways of working. And that's why I'm stressing, like the fact that, like Lean allows, when you implement Lean across, like HR function, it allows you to have that conversation across the functions, and enables you to decrease a little bit the silo thinking. It will not take...
It's the end-to-end view to the value delivery. It's from the beginning to the value delivery, and that's the end-to-end view. And you start having metrics around that. And that's the brutal thing, in my opinion, when you get to the metrics and understand, what, here in between us, we have a handover that usually takes X days or X weeks, and that's not acceptable. So really, really good. What about I've heard a lovely metaphor to say, we need to start aiming to build minimum viable bureaucracy in agile organizations.
Yeah.
And that means the bureaucracy that is just enough to be compliant and to be needed, but nothing on top of that. And I think that's a good good mantra to keep in mind.
Yeah, it is true. And I guess it's also kind of, like reinventing a little bit our roles, right? That the value that we bring as HR professional is not in the amount of documents we sign, approve, and where, like we say, yeah, okay, this can go further. So it's not about, like kind of that part of the ego, but it's a lot about, like kind of how do you deliver, like a product or a service that is, like kind of appealing to the users. And I'll give you a practical example. Like we've been working a few months ago in simplifying, kind of sabbatical leave process, which required not less than 6 or 7 approvals at the different chains in the organization. And we just did this mapping, like this motion kind of, like mapping and understanding where it goes and how long it takes. And we totally reinvented it. Basically, it's just the employee logging their sabbatical, and that's it. So it went from, like kind of 6 or 7 approval chains to, like just a logging, a registration of a sabbatical leave in a system, and that's it. And it requires, like kind of that way of starting with the need and the pain of the user in mind, rather starting from the policy standpoint, right? Because very often I hear the example of, hey, yeah, but our policy,
yes,
and the policy says this, and this is how we've always done it. But the policy is created by us, right? And that's something that we can change.
I agree. I want to share the story that I was interim HR leader, a similar one, interim HR leader coming into a consultancy, and they had a horrible travel expense process with the managers doing some expense checking and signing and sending by post, and it took ages for people to get their money when they wanted to have travel expenses back to themselves. And I said, why don't we just change it? And everybody went like, no, we can't, because there's a law saying that managers need to check the expenses. And I said, is there? Show me that law. I went to legal and finance and said, is there a law that says that managers need to check? And they said, no, there's not a law, it's a policy. And I said, let's change the policy. Let's just make bookkeeping check it and pay it directly. So we cut managers out of the process. And everybody went like, no, we can't. Why can't we? Because listen to this, what if our employees will trick us and ask us for travel expenses that are not real? And I went like, okay, so we have 2 options here. Either we have a high bureaucracy where we check everything because we can't trust our employees, or we can trust our very capable, very, very skilled employees to ask for their hotel and taxi and flight bills back. Perhaps we'll choose the trusting approach for this and not that bureaucracy approach. So this is also a cultural thing, of course, but remembering that sometimes it's not even about the process. Sometimes it's about the human view of how we think about the users.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I guess, like the other aspect that we haven't touched so far in our discussion is, like kind of what happens outside of the HR team and what are the goals and strategies of the business. Like what I've seen, like kind of influencing very strongly the adoption of lean, or kind of, like employee experience, or customer centricity is very often, like kind of the mission and the vision of the company, right? Like how often, like do we talk about that? And, like, because if you think about it, if you want to deliver, like customer-centric services to your end customers, then, like you as an employee, you expect that internally, and you want to kind of preach what you are saying, right? So I see a lot more strength, like kind of in looking for those examples outside of HR and using them for the benefit of influencing change within HR processes. And one of good example is to say, hey, like how does our HR strategy and the way we approach processes and services align with how do we deliver value to our end customers, and how can we learn from that, and how can we deliver these things, like kind of differently. And, like kind of don't be afraid to go outside of HR and talk to people from the business. I think nowadays in a lot of environments, we know outside of HR, we have lots of functions that do user experience design and that work with Agile and so on. And you can go and spend time with them, and you would be astonished, like how happy they are to share experiences, advice, and just learn from how, like how they are working, basically.
So now we're kind of moving into the Agile part. So Agile in HR. Let's talk about a couple of examples around that. And one of the key things that we started with was the experience-based design so when we work with Agile, just some background, we are very keen on understanding touch points from the user towards our product or process or service. And in those touch points, is it helpful? Is it valuable? Is it useful? What is the emotion? So we really want to understand the user journey throughout the whole experience. And to be able to start designing this, we do a lot of co-creation. And you mentioned go and talk with people. Yeah. Don't sit in your bunker thinking that you have the right answers. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I guess, like we talked in the beginning, right, about, kind of surveys and death by surveys, I would call it, because we over survey everyone. And I think what Agile does, it forces you to get outside of your chair and outside of your little cubicle or, kind of bubble within your team and go out and talk to users of your services. And, I love doing empathy interviews, and, I'm always advocating for everyone within my operational teams to do that on a regular basis, to pick processes and just go to talk to people that have used our processes. A very interesting, powerful way of doing that is also to write down your preconceptions before you do that.
Oh, yes.
Very interesting. You get lots of aha moments because, we are humans, right? So we go in with some thinking, oh, I know what is
we have a bias. We have a bias.
I know exactly what they're going to complain about. This is what it is. Please do that exercise and write down all your preconceived ideas before you go into the interviews. Take a piece of paper, and write them on the right side, and on the left side, write what you have heard from the users, and then do the comparison. It is mind-blowing. It has been mind-blowing to me very often, and it's a very humbling exercise as well to be in front of, this, this differentiation. But it also kind of, allows you to understand, that maybe, what the solution that you have in mind is not the solution that is wanted for the users, right?
Exactly.
Features or, the way you are thinking of designing a new process, or improving a new process may seem important to you, and you think from word of mouth that, this is a pain, but actually when you go in and talk to people, you realize that, actually that's not a pain, and there is another pain that you can tackle. And that is, I think, the power of Agile. And it will definitely, it will definitely change, the way you are thinking, and also the level of energy you have within the HR organization, because it brings a lot of great creative energy to go and talk to people and hear about, things, and it gets you into that, kind of groove of things where you get excited about, oh, okay, so this is what actually, what actually needs to be fixed, and it brings that motivation and alignment between multiple team members. So I encourage, using empathy interviews on a regular basis. I think very often when we have a process to improve, we tend to go fast, and we start cutting from
exactly
from exercises. And empathy interviews, they take some time, and they need planning and so on. So very often you probably, cut down on the amount of time you spend understanding, the user's experience. So doing this on a regular basis, I think it takes away that pain, and you constantly get, a flow of feedback that is coming directly from the users that are using your services.
Excellent. I know a couple of companies who've already mastered this on a level that when they develop global new products, processes, services, they have what they call a design team coming in to run a design sprint. And Netflix has gone down to, I think, 2 or 3 days now with the design path. So in 3 days, they have gone through the interviews, understanding what the needs are, building prototypes, getting feedback of the prototypes, building the final requirements, features, and testing those out with some users and stakeholders. 3 days, they've done this. Then they can move into delivering a global product to 10,000 people. I have another company who who has also this team. They do it in 4 or 5 days. Enough of design thinking, enough of understanding the users to be able to create greater products. Some others, I know one company who has a policy of never ever release anything to the users if you don't know how it's going to work. So you have to do some testing, some validation before. And I think these are great examples of how to really bring agility into HR, is to put the user and the value in the center and start from there. And there are so many tools to do that. We wouldn't go through that. I have another story that I shared last time and really resonated with many people online, is the person who went through our training, Agile training, and she went back. This was in Chile, I think, or Peru, Peru, I think. She worked for a factory, and they had a recognition process where anybody who come up with good ideas for improving the factory's efficiency were awarded with $100 gift card to a restaurant. And when she went back to starting redesigning this process, she went to speak the empathy interviews, and people who said, I feel bad at getting 100% gift card to a restaurant. I would never spend $100 on a restaurant. I need that to other stuff, so it's not feeling good to go to a restaurant to spend $100 for people who are working in the factory. So they decided to redesign it totally. They in the empathy interviews, they came up with what is important for these people. Family is important. Getting recognition for peers is important, and being together is important. So they remodel the recognition around these important values. And anytime the factory now has a maintenance break, they have a family day where they bring all the families of the workers, have some food available, and anybody who had come up with an idea can talk about their idea to everyone. And how they are awarded is with these kind of consumer products that the factory is producing, so own products, taking home to their families so they can share the products with their families. In a totally, going from $100 gift card to a recognition with your family, a lunch recognition or something. Totally different, but this agile way of understanding things helped with really redesigning that.
Yeah.
Do you have more examples of agile in HR services? One more example.
I guess, like that, understanding the journey the user goes through, like we were talking previously about, siloed thinking and so on. And one kind of, nice tool or exercise, that can be done for a lot of processes is to actually kind of, walk the journey of the employee for the different phases and functions for the same process. And that's very powerful, right? Because you understand, kind of decisions that you have taken knowingly, and the effect it has overall, right, on the process. Many years ago, we've done this kind of, journey mapping exercise for our onboarding process. And we realized that in the process, we knowingly, with intention, designed not more than 15 notifications that were going to the new hire within the span of the first week. All of them were designed intentionally by various teams, and they were all going at the same time to the same user. So imagine that poor new hire, being bombarded with notifications and reminders within the first 5 days from a lot of places. And we wouldn't have managed to kind of, figure that out if it wasn't, for that, kind of employee journey map and kind of, understanding, hey, how it actually looks like. That was a big aha moment. We were a little bit embarrassed as well about it. So I remember sitting in that room, and we were counting the number of notifications, and we're like, oh, okay, that's really shameful, right? That it took us so long to
really good example.
But I think this is kind of reality of a lot of kind of siloed or even big organizations, right? So think about doing these exercises. Yes, it is taking you out of your comfort zone, out of your job responsibility, right? Defined, but it is goes in hand, right, with the spirit of Agile and in general, kind of the human-centered, co-creation. I think
Excellent.
It really follows those principles.
I've got one which I would like to add that is a beautiful example for walking the user's path. Another really different example about using agility in HR services, how the prioritization methods are used in Agile, because the HR services also have very many conflicting priorities. It's too much on your table. So you can learn a lot about how Agile teams are prioritizing different methods. Effort value or Moscow are the two methods that I would look into, which are very helpful for having team discussions about where should we use our effort and energy. We are on time. We could talk about this forever. So I want to say a big thank you to Monica for sharing your expertise, your tips, tricks, and stories around Lean and Agile in HR services. Do you want to say a couple of words for the listeners before we end the session?
No, it was definitely kind of, like a great experience, and I would say, like, kind of take the courage to experiment with some of these examples on a little scale, right? Like, you don't need to think about a revolution. You can start, really small, playing, like with a tool, seeing the value that it gives you, and then kind of, maybe expand it with other team members. So I would say just take the courage, right, and test it out. And if at least a couple of you are going out inspired to go and do an empathy interview with users of our services, then our mission is complete today.
Very, very good. Thank you, Monica. Have a fantastic day, everyone. If you want to get in touch with Agile HR Community regarding our trainings, our consultancy, our services, we're happy to help you. So see you around in our next meetup, maybe. Have a fantastic spring. Bye.
Bye.